I Thirst, Part 7. The Appendix to Spiritual Testament of Mother Teresa. My children, my dear sisters, brothers, and fathers, since this letter is my personal, I wanted to write it with my own hand, but there are so many things to say. But even if there are not from my hand, they come from my heart. Jesus wants that I tell you, especially in this Holy Week, how much love He has for each one of you beyond all you can imagine. I worry that some of you have not really met Jesus one on one, you and Jesus alone. We can certainly spend time in the chapel, but have you perceived with the eyes of the soul with what love He looks at you? Have you really come to know the living Jesus, not from books, but by offering Him shelter in your hearts? Have you heard His words of love? Ask for this grace. He has the burning desire to give it to you. As long as you do not hear Jesus in the silence of your heart, you cannot hear Him say, I thirst in the heart of your poor ones. Never abandon the intimate daily contact with Jesus as a real loving person instead of just a pure idea. How can we spend even one single day without listening to Jesus when He says, I love you? That is impossible. Our souls need that as much as our body needs to breathe. If not, prayer dies and meditation degenerates into simple reflection. Jesus wants that each one of us listen to Him as He speaks to you in the silence of your heart. Be attentive to what could prevent this personal contact with the living Jesus. The devil will try to use the wounds of life, indeed, our very own faults, in order to persuade her that it is impossible for Jesus to really love you. Beware that this is a danger for all of us. But the saddest thing is that this is completely contrary to what Jesus would want and expect to hear from you. Not only that He loves you, but even more, He ardently desires you. He misses you when you do not come close to Him. He is thirsty for you. He loves you always, even when you do not feel worthy of Him. When you are not accepted by others, or even sometimes by yourself, He always accepts you. My children, you don't have to be different from what you are in reality for Jesus to love you. Simply believe that you are precious to Him. Bring your sufferings to His feet and simply open your heart so that He loves you the way you are, and He will do the rest. Each one of you is aware that Jesus loves you, but with this letter, I want to address your heart. Jesus desires to move our hearts so as not to lose our first love, our vocation, especially in the future when I will have left you. This is why I want you to read this letter in front of the Blessed Sacrament in the place where it was written, so that Jesus Himself can speak to each one of you. Why do I tell you this? The letter of the Holy Father about I thirst struck me so much that it is hard for me to tell you what I felt. This letter has allowed me to discover even more the beauty of our vocation. How great is God's love for us, because He has chosen our congregation to quench this thirst of Jesus, this thirst for love and thirst for soul, by giving us a special place in His church. At the same time, we remind the world of that thirst which is about to be forgotten. I wrote to the Holy Father to thank him. This letter is a sign of that great thirst that Jesus experiences for each human being. It is also a sign for me, a sign that the time has come to speak openly about the gift given to me on September 10, to explain as well as I can what the thirst of Jesus means for me. For me, the thirst of Jesus is something so intimate that until now my shyness prevented me from talking to you about what happened on September 10. At first I thought I should imitate Our Lady, who kept all these things in her heart. That is why I have not talked about I thirst particularly in public. Nevertheless, my letter instructions always pointed it out and showed the means to quench this thirst through prayer, intimacy with Jesus, and respect for our vows, especially the fourth one. For me, it is very clear that everything about the Missionaries of Charity MC is intended to quench the thirst of Jesus. His words, written on the walls of all the chapels of the MCs, are not of the past but living, here and now spoken to you. Do you believe in them? If yes, you would hear and feel His presence. Let Him become as intimate to you as He is in me. That would be the greatest joy that you could offer me. I will try to help you understand those words, but it is Jesus Himself who alone can tell you, I thirst. Hear your own name being called, and not only one time but every day, when you listen with your heart. This letter, it should be this, I thirst, is a much deeper phrase than if Jesus would have just said, I love you. As long as you do not know in a very intimate way that Jesus is thirsty for you, it will be impossible for you to know who He wants to be for you, nor who He wants you to be for Him. The heart and the soul of the MC consist exclusively in the thirst in the heart of Jesus hidden in the poor. This is the only source from which the life of the MC is nourished, and it shows you our goal as well as our fourth vow and the spirit of our congregation. To quench the thirst of the living Jesus among us, the only reason for the congregation to exist and its unique objective. Tell me, can we say about ourselves as well that we know this is our only reason to live? In order to know it, ask yourself the following question. Suppose that the thirst of Jesus be no longer our goal and be no longer written on the walls of our chapels. Would that bring about a difference in my vocation and my relationship with Jesus and my work? Would it change anything in my life, and would I feel a big loss? Ask yourself this question honestly and let them be for everyone the test to discover whether the thirst for Jesus is a living reality in his or her life and not only a beautiful idea. I thirst. And you have done it to me. Remember that you must always combine these two phrases, the means with the goal. Let no one separate what God has united. Let us not underestimate our very concrete means, work for the poor, however small or humble it is, which makes something very beautiful out of our lives in the eyes of the Lord. Those are the most precious gifts from God to our congregation. Because of this presence of Jesus, so hidden and yet so near, He is able to touch us. In our work for the poor, our goal would disappear and thirst for Jesus would reduce itself to words empty of meaning and response. But by uniting the two, our missionary vocation will remain living and real, just as Our Lady requested. Be also judicious in the choice of those who preach our retreats. Not everyone understands our spirit well. Even if they were wise men and saints, it would still not guarantee that they necessarily understand our vocation. Besides, if they came to tell you something different from what I have written in this letter, I beg you not to listen to them or let them confuse you. The thirst of Jesus is the source, the focus, and the goal of everything the missionaries of charity are and do. The church has confirmed it several times. Our call is to quench the thirst of Jesus, the thirst for love of souls by working for the salvation and the sanctification of the poorest of the poor. That and only that, nothing else. Let us do everything in our power to protect the gift of God to our congregation. Dear children, have confidence in me and listen to me attentively to what I tell you now. Only the thirst of Jesus, together with our constant listening, our search, and our heartfelt response, only that thirst will keep our congregation alive after I will have left you. If this thirst is truly made the basis of your life, everything will go well for us. One day I will have left you, but the thirst of Jesus will never leave you. The thirsting Jesus in the poor, you will have with you always. But for that reason, I want the active sisters and the active brothers, the contemplative sisters with the brothers and priests, to help each other mutually to nourish Jesus, to quench his thirst with the means of their respective gifts. By supporting each other, sharing with one another, you are one family united in this one goal and that unique objective. Do not exclude cooperators or the lay missionaries from that requirement, but help them to understand it, because that vocation is also theirs. Since the first task of the priest is the ministry of preaching, I have asked our priest several years ago to start preaching on that theme, I thirst, in order to enter deeper into the gift that God granted us on September 10th. And since I feel clearly that Jesus will ask them in the future to preach more and more on this subject, pray to Our Lady to keep them focused on that important aspect of their fourth vow. Our Lady will help us all to remain faithful, because it was she who, with Saint John and I am sure Saint Mary Magdalene, was the first person to hear the cry of Jesus, I thirst. Since she has been at Calvary, she knows the intensive depth of this ardent desire of Jesus for us and for the poor. But the rest of us, we do not. Do we know it? Do we feel it as she did? Ask her to teach you, because you and the whole congregation are hers. Her mission is to bring you to see the light in the heart of the crucified Jesus, as she did for Saint John and Saint Mary Magdalene. Previously, Our Lady asked me, but now it is I who ask you in her name, begging you, hear the thirst of Jesus. May it be for each one, as the Holy Father expressed in his letter, a gospel for life. How do you approach the thirst of Jesus? One single secret: the closer you come to Jesus, better you will come to know his thirst. Repent and believe in the gospel. Jesus said to us, of what should we repent? Our indifference, our hardness of heart. And what should we believe in? That Jesus is thirsty from now on for your heart and for the poor. He who knows your weakness desires nevertheless only your love. He simply wants you to let Him love you. He is the master of time, and each time when we approach Him, He associates us with Our Lady, Saint John, and Saint Mary Magdalene. Listen to Him, listen as He calls your very own name, and thus will my joy and yours be complete. Pray and God will bless you. Mother Teresa. An interview with Father Brian, MC, postulator of the cause for the beatification of Mother Teresa. Interviewer. Mother Teresa impressed the world by her dedication to the poorest of the poor. How was it possible for a frail woman to go out in the streets of Calcutta and the world to cure the souls of lepers and caress the pariahs of modern societies? Father Brian, I think the key to her life is precisely the fact that she was a woman totally in love with Jesus. We have found writings from the time of her youth in which she said that Jesus was her first love. She spoke as a girl who was in love. For her, her dedication to the neediest, to the poorest of the poor was a response to a call. Even in moments of darkness, she was convinced that it was an authentic call from Jesus. She was convinced of that phrase that she often repeated, God's work. She felt like God span His instrument. Interviewer. Every beatification is a message for the world. What is the message the Church is giving in announcing Mother Teresa's beatification? Father Brian. Her central message is love towards God, not just towards her neighbor. At the time that she felt the call to found the Congregation of Missionary Charity, she experienced a harsh interior trial. It was a spiritual experience in which she did not feel consolation. However, also in these times of trial, it was love that led her to respond to her mission. On one occasion, giving her public recognition, India's Prime Minister Indira Gandhi said these words more or less: "In this world of today, so frenetic, it is easy to forget the most essential things." Mother Teresa teaches that love is what is the most essential. At the same time, her life is full of examples of love for others, not just for the poor, but also for all the persons whom she met, the sisters of missionary charity, the people who visited her. In reality, Mother Teresa leaves us the message to do ordinary things with extraordinary love. When she spoke to the people she met, she said that this attitude should not just be lived with the poor. One must begin by loving the members of one family who are in need of a word of encouragement. One must begin by loving someone one knows who might be in need of a letter. One must begin to love by giving a smile to the needy. However, we have been able to see how faith is also one of the characteristic virtues, because otherwise one cannot love in that way, from morning till night, sleeping 3 or 4 hours at night, giving herself each day of her life to the neediest. Interviewer. What has been the greatest challenge of the process of the beatification? Father Brian. There were 2 particularly difficult tasks. The first, to collect or find all the available information, because it meant collecting materials, testimonies, facts, and coming from people all over the world. In the process, we have compiled more than 8,000 documents, 80 volumes of documentation with testimonies and writings. In the process, there has been testimony of 113 persons of her life, virtue, and fame for holiness. However, hundreds of other people, being unable to travel, have sent their testimony. We have not yet been satisfied to do only the indispensable work. We have done much more than the minimum, because this work has served to understand her person better. The second challenge was the writing of the Positio, the document in which all the testimony, deeds, and documents are recorded, on which to base the postulation of a cause of beatification. As there was so much material, it wasn't at all easy. We have been able to count on a really good team made of the priests, women, religious, and lay people, volunteers, who made all this work possible. Interviewer. Have you discovered aspects of Mother Teresa that were hidden when you carried out this huge research? We have been able to understand, says Father Brian, that her simplicity concealed in reality a depth that very few had understood or even imagined. When she started missionary charity at the age of 36, she demonstrates in her writing amazing spiritual maturity. We know that a person with this worldwide reputation for holiness and extraordinary attraction she exercised had to have something. But what was it? This was her secret. Her depth, her spiritual life, her love even in trials are now exposed. Interviewer. In recent months, there has been talk of the dark night that, like the mystics, Mother Teresa felt in important periods of her life. What did it consist of? Father Brian. Spiritual fruit comes from sacrifice, from the cross. Prior to the inspiration for her work, she had already had experience of darkness. However, it is important to keep in mind that the night, this inner suffering, is the fruit of a union with Christ, as happened with Saint Teresa of Jesus or Paul of the Cross. On one side is union with Jesus, and love unites, and being united to Christ, she understood Christ's suffering when he cried from the cross, my God, why hast thou abandoned me?" However, this night, this suffering is also caused by their postulate love of others. Loving Christ, she also understands the suffering of others, their loneliness, also their distancing of themselves from God. Mother Teresa's dark night was due, therefore, to the double dimension that the love of men and women religious experiences in the first place, the spousal, her love of Christ, which leads her to be united to his suffering, and in the second place, a redemptive love, which leads to sharing in the redemption, to proclaim to others the love of God so that they will discover salvation through prayer and sacrifice. Therefore, more than a test of faith or a test of love, more than suffering from the experience, not feeling the love of Jesus, suffered because of her desire for Jesus, her thirst for Jesus, her thirst for love. The goal of the congregation precisely to slake the thirst of Jesus on the cross through our love for Him and our dedication to souls. Mother not only shared a physical and a material poverty with the poor, she felt the thirst, the abandonment that people experience. In fact, the greatest poverty is not to be loved, to be rejected. Interviewer: some newspaper newsers have tried to deny the miraculous character of the cure that has opened the doors of the process of beatification of Mother Teresa of Calcutta. What is the real story? Father Brian: it is the case of an Indian woman, Monica Besra, who was cured on September 5th, 1998, the first anniversary of Mother Teresa's death. On one hand, she suffered from tubercular meningitis. On the other hand, she had a large abdominal cystic mass that originated in her right ovary. This large cystic mass disappeared without any medical explanation, and the scientific commission verified that analyzed the case. It is true that the tubercular meningitis could have been cured, as some newspapers have said, by the effect of medicine. However, this wasn't the miracle. The miracle was a sudden, in one night, and inexplicable cure from the tumefaction.